On today's five-star flex, we're going to talk Tennessee recruiting. They just landed David Sanders. They're on a heater right now. They just flipped Jaden Harmon. We're going to talk about the impact that this is sending through college football recruiting. Then we're going to slide down to Athens and talk some UGA recruiting with Jeremy Johnson ahead of their game against Clemson. And then at the end, we're going to talk to Anthony Turbo Rogers out of Alabama, who's committed to Bama, but you got UGA and Ohio State looming and lurking. All that and more on the five-star flex. The Tennessee Volunteers are on an absolute heater right now after landing David Sanders Jr., the #1 offensive tackle in the land. They also got a flip from Jaden Harmon, who's from Rome, Georgia, who was committed to Bama. Now he's at Tennessee. It's been a heck of a week for the Volunteers. And if you're a Volunteer fan, you have got to be absolutely ecstatic with the way JoshHyp and company are recruiting. But what I want to talk about today is, why is Tennessee recruiting so well? Why are they able to land the guys that they're landing? Why do they have the #5 class in the land? And we can start with David Sanders and talk about his recruitment, but it's not just David Sanders. It's everybody in this class. And so we're going to talk about it. So let's just start with David Sanders. How did they land David Sanders? In my opinion, one of the reasons was they started early and they finished strong. Tennessee has been notorious for starting early, and they've been really good when it comes to identifying talent and saying who they want and recruiting well and getting people to like Tennessee early. Let's flash back to the summer, COVID summer, 2020. In the summer, Tennessee had the #1 rated class, and then it just totally falls apart. All right. There's a reason, and we know about the Pruitt era and all of that, but they recruited well early, and some of the other stuff we're not going to talk about. We're just talking about strictly identifying talent and connecting with talent. Okay, cool. So here comes JoshHyp. Takes that same mentality as far as identifying talent and starting early. They got in, like, David Sanders was somebody who was contacted, or the initial contact with Tennessee came before he even stepped on the football field as a ninth grader. All right. JoshHyp took that mantle and continued and made sure that his staff was able to, hey, this is our guy, regardless of if somebody thinks he's going to Georgia, regardless if Nebraska is in the league, no, regardless if Ohio State is making a push. This is our guy. They took ownership of David Sanders' recruitment before he committed. And I think that's really important to do that early and to be consistent throughout. You also got to talk about having the same energy from the start to finish. Anytime that I talked to a Tennessee staffer about David Sanders, they had the same energy from the time he was in 10th grade to right now. There was always like this excitement when you heard a staffer from Tennessee talk about David Sanders and their pretty much like their possibility of getting them, but also about him and their family. Anytime I talked to somebody from Tennessee, there was like it was almost like David Sanders was already a part of the family. And I think that's important. So the more Tennessee continues to start early and finish strong, more importantly, you're going to see these type of classes continue to roll in. David Sanders is the second highest rated recruit ever for Tennessee. This is huge. And now you're just going to see more and more people say, dang, the way they closed on David Sanders, if they continue to do this, that now they go from the team that's getting 1 or 2 5-stars a class to possibly getting 3 or 4. And you know, once you start to kind of creep up with those 5 stars, the blue chippers follow, and now you become a destination. I always talk about you want to become a destination location, and that's what Tennessee is becoming right now. All right. The second part of why I think Tennessee is recruiting so well is their on and off-field staff. JoshHyp has every right to operate like a CEO. That offense has been one of the most electric offenses over the past couple of years in the entire college football landscape. He is dialed in. When you see him on the sidelines, you know whose offense that is. I think that is so important. but also the fact that he's able to call that type of offense that garners recruits, that has receivers want to come play for him, that has quarterbacks want to come play for him, but still recruit. So think about this. Starbucks recently fired their CEO, $100 million type guy, fired him. Why? Because he goes out on a podcast and says, I don't work after a certain amount of time. There's nothing you can do to make me work after a certain amount of time. He had a CEO mindset. That's somebody else's job. I'm going to delegate these things. JoshHyp isn't doing that. JoshHyp is getting his hands dirty. JoshHyp, even though he has this great offense, the thing that helps you with JoshHyp being a guy that helps, that has this offense, but also has the pulse of recruiting, he can sell it in a way that an offensive coordinator can't. He can sell it in a way that a position coach can't. And he's doing that. I've talked to over 80 of the top players in the entire 25 class. Every time I talk to a player from Tennessee, they always mention JoshHyp. It's a consistent theme. Even when he doesn't get a guy, they still talk about the relationship that they built with JoshHyp. If that's where you're starting at, a guy who knows that in order to recruit against the Kirby Smart, who knows that if you're recruiting against Ryan Day, if you're recruiting against even a Mike Norvell, if you're recruiting against a Kalen DeBoer, you cannot turn your phone off at a certain time. You got to be ready. And it shows. So now you got this guy, the CEO, who's working late, playing basketball with recruits on visits and beating them. You heard that on the 5-Star Flex. You've got a guy here. Well, that trickles down. So now once you get past JoshHyp, who's had contact with all of these recruits, now you get into the position coaches and the coordinators. You get a guy like Kelsey Pope, a younger guy, who was really instrumental in getting a guy like Mike Matthews the year before, a younger guy. Then you mix him with a guy like Rodney Garner, who a grizzled veteran, who's been in plenty of recruiting battles. Auburn was the guy who got Derek Brown to Auburn. When you talk about the defensive line guys that he had at the University of Georgia, he's bringing all that experience. Okay, now we want to go experience again. Okay, let's go Willie Martinez, who's been all over the country and knows every back alley when it comes to different high schools and where to go find people and who's the guy you need to call in order to get a recruit. Then you got, you're going experience again. Then you get a guy like Alex Abelin. Now, how did you get to Son Brown? That's how you got him. Another young guy. So what they're doing is they're fusing a young energy, a young portion of their staff in with a more experienced type of approach. When you talk about the Willie Martinez's and you talk about the Rodney Garners, and you're getting this fusion where you're able to relate on different levels. If you have a parent who may be a little older, who has a younger student athlete, well, you can kind of mix and match there. And I think that's really important to not have too much of anything on a recruiting staff. So once you get off, and not even to mention Tim Banks, the DC, super cool guy. So once you get past the on-field staff, who's going to be calling, who's going to be sending texts, who's going to be showing up to your school on the road when there's when it's open, it's not dead, who's going to actually be at the in-home visits. Then when you go to Tennessee, they blitz you with the off-field staff. You got a guy like LaVon Harbin, who's always been with Rodney Garner, who was always instrumental in recruiting. They call him Poke Chop. He's the type of guy that you want around when you have a family-type atmosphere because he's like an uncle, a really cool uncle. Then you talk about a guy like Steven Ruzick, who's been at Auburn, who's been at North Carolina, who was even at Indiana, so he got to learn the Midwest. And I'm going to tell you why that's important in a minute. Who's been constantly on these top 30 for 30 lists. Top 30, under 30, excuse me. You get a guy like Ruzick. Then you got Danny O'Rourke. These are all off-field guys. Like Tennessee is building something special when it comes to recruiting, and it's showing. All right. I know I sound a little bit excited, but I love this type of stuff, man. Like you got to forgive me. But what Tennessee is doing more than anything that I really love is that they're recruiting with a national imprint. David Sanders, where is he from? Charlotte. Douglas Utu, who is from Las Vegas. Now, a lot of people are talking about David Sanders, but we're forgetting about Doug. Big Doug, Utu, excuse my pronunciation. He's the type of guy that could have been an anchor or a cornerstone for a recruiting class on the offensive line himself. He's a top 5 interior offensive lineman, like compositely. I'm telling you, this guy's a baller. Now you put him with a guy like David Sanders, you have 2 stalwarts on the offensive line for years to come to protect George McIntyre, who's also a 5-star type quarterback, who's been really, really instrumental in recruiting. When you look at Tennessee's recruiting class currently, they only have, of their top 11 players, they only have 2 guys from the state of Tennessee. They're recruiting Las Vegas. They're recruiting Indiana. They're recruiting Charlotte. They're recruiting Georgia really well when you look at Travis Smith, who just went off for about 270 yards against Langston Hughes, like straight baller, and who also has a teammate who's another 6'3" receiver. It's almost impossible to stop those guys when they're throwing the ball. But yeah, you look at what they're doing in Georgia. You look at what they're doing with a guy like Shady Hayward, a safety who's really, really athletic. I think he's probably one of the most freakish athletes in the state this year. With Jaden Harmon, like they're recruiting everywhere. And it started with Nico. You go pull Nico, and how did you get Nico? Well, one, and what was important about Nico? Let me start there. What was important was you were able to go across country and bring the top quarterback in the class to Tennessee. That was huge. What it did was it took that T, it took that logo from Knoxville to California. Everybody in the country had to see that. That was huge. Now, fast forward a couple of years later, it's not so outlandish to see a guy who may not be in your recruiting footprint want to come to Tennessee. Another reason, Nico made headlines when it came down to the NIL. Tennessee ain't shy about NIL. Their collective is not shy about letting you know, hey, what we say is what we're going to do. Case in point, Jalen Rashada, from who's had the big deal with Florida, right? Didn't get paid. Goes to Arizona State. Now he's at Georgia. A huge deal made about all of this money, and it was at the birth of NIL, and it was, oh, why is he getting paid all this money, and are they going to be able to pay it? And no, they can't pay it, so we've got to transfer. Nico got a big deal too, but guess what? There wasn't a word said. The check was good. So everywhere you see that T, the collective, the check is good. And I think that works wonders when it comes to recruiting with the national imprint. It's not all about the money, because when you're recruiting 5 stars, everybody has the cachet to recruit them. Everybody has resources. But Tennessee being able to say, look at these 2 situations. You come to Tennessee, the check is going to clear. The collective is going to be sure of that. So now when you recruit with a national imprint, that only helps you going into somebody else's backyard and saying, hey, look, you want to play in front of 100,000? Oh, and not to mention, they're also building like this, almost like a football metropolis around Neyland Stadium right now. That's similar to like what the Braves have with the Battery, how you can go to out to the Braves field, to the Braves Stadium early in the day, stay to the game, stay all night, party, whatever you want to do, kick it with the family. Now they're setting that up in Knoxville. This is going to be a completely different game day situation than we've ever seen. Tennessee is on a heater. And from what I see, it's not about to stop anytime soon. This is a very exciting time to be a Tennessee fan. I got a special treat on the 5-Star Flex. My man, recruiting insider for the University of Georgia Bulldogs, Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy, what's going on, big dog?
Nothing much, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm great. Listen, it's a very exciting time of the year. UGA Clemson next weekend. How many recruits do you expect to be at that game in Atlanta?
I mean, it'll be a good handful. I mean, I definitely think there'll be multiple commits. A couple guys that Chase Linton out of North Atlanta, 4-star, just decommitted from Rutgers, is expected to be there. That's probably the biggest uncommitted guy that'll be there. 2026 5-star for high 4-star Ekene Okongbo. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, man. But his brother's committed to Georgia or plays for Georgia. He's a freshman, but big offensive tackle out of North Carolina is also expected to be there. Yeah, that's kind of the list right now. I'm sure that we will find more names over the next couple of weeks or the next couple of days as those guys kind of make their plans.
No, absolutely. All right, so that's a really big game. And I know you're really like the guy in recruiting, but I want to talk a little more just outcome. How do you see that game going?
I think it'll be a really competitive game.
Okay.
Georgia's gonna have a chance to make some, statements on defense just because Clemson runs that spread offense and they got an experienced quarterback, got a couple guys in that running back room that have played a lot too. Phillip is a big time player that we've seen here in Georgia for a while. So that'll be an opportunity for them to see some of the things that they may see later in the year with, the Ole Misses, the Alabamas, even a little bit of what Tennessee runs just schematically on offense. So it'll be a good test for them, whether win or lose or draw. That'll be something they can file away for later in the year. I think it'll be competitive. Georgia's offense will have a chance to kind of build an identity.
Right.
They lost Brock Bowers, so you gotta try to figure out what you're gonna do. You don't just lose Brock Bowers and then things just kind of pick up right where they left off. You have to find some new playmakers. Obviously, Oscar Delp's a good player. I mean, Oscar probably would start for 98% of the teams in college football if Brock Bowers weren't there last year. So he'll have his opportunities, and this probably has a chance to be his coming out party next week.
Sounds exciting. All right, speaking of exciting, there's nothing more exciting in the recruiting world than a flip. Who do you think that Georgia has their eye on with the spatula?
Oh, man, they got a couple guys. I mean, Chase Linton, before he decommitted from Rutgers, was a big-time target. Braxton Cowell's another Rutgers commit that, Georgia's they offered, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, that they're really talking to a lot. I mean, Kevin Wynn's a guy that's committed to Florida State that Georgia hadn't stopped recruiting, and they're still recruiting, especially losing Christian Gary, that recruitment becomes even more important just because of, Georgia needing another guy in the defensive line room, potentially a 3-technique type of guy. So I think that Kevin Wynn, like I said, Braxton Kyle, I mean, even a guy like Shane Marshall, a running back at Irwin County that's committed to Minnesota, is a guy that you might want to watch down the road a little bit. He came in for camp, I want to say the last week of July. So Tay Harris is somebody they're communicating with, obviously committed to Clemson, but I don't really feel like there's anything happening there at this time. It's just more of a, hey, how you doing? And still communicating, keeping the bridge, open a little bit there. But, obviously he's a former Georgia commit that ended up going to Clemson. So that's kind of the main guys right now. I mean, obviously you still got Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin out there uncommitted. So those are some big time targets there.
Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin, as you mentioned, are two of the most highly sought-after defensive linemen in this cycle. Can you give me an update on those two and where they stand in their recruitment?
Yeah, both guys are taking their time. I mean, I think Justice is going to go all the way up until National Signing Day, and he's going to take his visits. He's going to take a look around, and he's been to Alabama, he's been to Georgia multiple times. Feel like Georgia has a lot of momentum, but there's still 2 or 3 more months left in this thing, so you just never know what's going to happen there. Elijah, he cut it down to 3. I want to say it was last month sometime. He cut down to Miami, Georgia, USC. Georgia has been a program that has been on his radar for since his freshman year. They've recruited him hard. They've been a major priority on his list as well. I feel like they have a lot of momentum. They have a lot of energy there, and I think his recruitment probably will come to a close. I don't know if he goes all the way to signing day. He may go to maybe October or November. And he takes an official visit during the fall. He took a unofficial, that says a lot just because those things are valuable. You don't want to just throw them away. I mean, he took an unofficial when everyone else was on official visits, so he paid his own dime to come up here and be with some of those guys, during their official visits. Some of the guys ended up being commit. So that kind of tells you where he thinks of Georgia. I feel like nothing's really changed there. And he took a visit to USC, but I feel like Georgia's in a good spot there. And we'll see. We'll see what happens this fall.
Absolutely. What position group do you consider to be Georgia's strongest that they have committed right now to 25 class?
Oh man, that's I'm gonna go with receiver just
Oh
because
wow.
like I feel like there's a lot of the whole why does Georgia keep missing on 5-star receivers, and obviously Travis Smith and CJ Wiley both committed elsewhere. Those are the two top guys in the state of Georgia. But I mean, you start looking at this group. I went and watched Landon Rolden play the other day. I think he's extremely talented. Tyler Williams is a big play guy that I think we don't really think about how big he. I mean, he's 6'1", 6'2". It's another outside type receiver, and then you got Talon Taylor is a guy I don't think people around nationally have really appreciated as much yet. Just with how I mean, it's a big play guy. Like he does a lot of great things, and he has a lot of upside as far as like where he could be at the next level. So. I mean, I even count Elias Williams as a receiver. I mean, he plays predominantly receiver in high school. I mean, 6'7", 230, 225 pounds. That's a matchup nightmare. So, I mean, all of these guys have a chance to make an early impact. I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, Thomas Blackshear is a guy that is in the state of Georgia. Is kind of he's down there in South Georgia, not really playing on a lot of these big high profile games. But I mean, Thomas Blackshear is one of the best playmakers in the state of Georgia. And maybe the country, just because of how physical he goes and plays above the rim. I mean, he reminds me a lot of George Pickens, which is crazy to say.
Wow.
I know that sounds crazy, but his game, there are some of the things, and even personality-wise, that kind of remind you of Justin or George Pickens. So I'm really high on that group. I mean, even when you throw Elias Williams in that group, Ethan Barbour, we're going to say pass catcher. Ethan Barbour is one of the best route running tight ends in the country. So Georgia did a good job with that group this year, and I don't think we, have done a great job, selling it. I mean, I think that group is really special. So,
Speaking of great groups that Georgia usually gets, it's the offensive line.
yeah,
This year, there was a prospect that shocked a lot of people when he committed to Georgia, and that's Jazar Jackson. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
All right, I'm gonna start it over.
Okay.
Speaking of position groups that Georgia usually does really well at recruiting, one of those is offensive line. This year, Georgia took an offensive line in their class that's now in fall camp already that shocked a lot of people. Jazar Jackson, the former basketball prodigy, is now offensive lineman. Have you heard anything about how his camp has been going and how he's performed?
Yeah, all the feedback we've gotten is that he's been really good, and this is somebody that there's not a lot of pressure for him to play right now. Georgia's offensive line is a veteran group. They're very talented, and they've had a lot of guys that they've recruited and think highly of. But him coming into that room as I think people are kind of surprised with how quickly he's picking up football. I mean, that's kind of been the whoa, he's huge. Whoa, he can actually play. He's not just big and out there still learning how to play. He's picking up this stuff really quickly. I mean, the guy's essentially been a professional athlete for the last 3 years, and those work habits show. I mean, I've had people tell me he's a generational talent. He's a guy that could be a $200 million player at some point. Like, that's high praise for a guy that's not played football since early in his high school career. And he's mostly been a basketball player, but that athleticism, those feet, those 6'9" frame, it's just things you can't teach. So, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I don't know what his role will be this year, but that next year and the year after are the years where he can have a chance to have a big impact.
That's exciting for Georgia fans, I'm sure. All right, last question before we get out. Are there any more standouts that you heard about from fall camp since it just wrapped?
Nate Fraser's been the guy that everybody keeps talking about. 5-star signing out of Mater Dei. He split carries at Mater Dei just because Jordan Davison's amazing as well. I think he's the guy that he came in late. He didn't get a chance to come in the spring. So I think we probably would know more about him if he played in the spring. But I mean, he's been, a guy that's been making big splash plays in practice. And I mean, it tracks because of the way he plays. He's a home run running back. I mean, Georgia's got a couple guys like Trevor Etienne and Rod Robinson and even Branson Robinson when he gets back, they can pound you a little bit. And Trevor Etienne's a versatile guy that can do a little bit of everything, but Nate Fraser gives you that hand it off on the 20 and he go 80. He
Yeah.
gives you that, and he also can run in between the tackles because he's not a small guy. So he's the complete package. And everybody keeps bringing up the DeAndre Swift and the Sony Michel's. When you start invoking those names in Georgia circles, that means that's a really good football player. So we'll see what his role is this first week. So, but I think he has a chance to have an early impact. And that's saying a lot because he's only been here for a month maybe. So.
Oh wow, Jeremy, thanks so much. It's been fun. I'll see you again in about 2 weeks. That cool?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love the show, man. Love being on it. Definitely appreciate you having me.
No, for sure, man. Thanks a lot, Jeremy from Dogs HQ. Let's roll. I'm here live with Anthony Turbo Rogers, one of the most explosive running backs in the country. Turbo, what's going on?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Man, I'm good. So, Turbo, you're committed to Alabama, and you've been committed to Bama for a long time. What was it about Kalen DeBoer and staff that made you want to keep your commitment to Alabama?
Mainly, Coach Robert Gillespie. I mean, he been recruiting me since 8th grade, and he stayed on staff, so I really had no reason to decommit.
Now, I like that a lot. When it comes to as far as wanting to stay in state, how important is it for you to represent that Alabama logo?
Yeah, it's just good to play in state. Play for Bama, like I said. Me and Coach G got a real good relationship, so I mean, it's it's good to represent your own state.
For sure. So right now, everybody in the country is still recruiting you. You're really one of the hottest names in the country. What schools are you talking to the most or contact you the most right now?
The main schools has been Bama, Georgia, Auburn, and Ohio State.
Okay. Are you planning on taking any OVs to these schools?
Yeah, I'm trying to take OVs to all those schools on this fall.
So would you consider that to be your final four?
I wouldn't say a Final Four because I mean I'm not sure what may happen in the future, but that's what I'm looking forward to right now.
So with you being committed to Bama, you've been very open about schools that you plan on taking official visits to. What's been Bama's response to you wanting to look around to make sure that hey, that your commitment is where you want to be?
I feel like they respect it because I mean they understand that I mean at the end of the day I should still be able to be recruited and enjoy that because I mean I still need to make sure that I'm making the right decision for the future. So I feel like it's a respect thing. So I mean I respect them with how they recruit and they respect how I do my recruitment as well.
That's good that you guys have that mutual respect. So it's been very open. And you hear a lot of times guys are like, well, I'm gonna try to sneak over here and take this visit, but you've been very open about it.
Right.
Speaking of visits and being in other states, you were at the IMG Academy. What was it like playing there with all that talent?
Oh yeah, it was great there. I mean, it's good playing with talent like that. I mean, the practice is high intensity, and you're getting better every day because you're with a lot of good athletes. I mean, learning something new every day and just it's great there.
All right, so this year you're back home in Montgomery. You'll be playing at Carver. What do you feel like the energy is going to be in that stadium when you get to run out there as part of the Carver team?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be real live. I mean, it feels good to be back home, be able to represent your city for the senior year. So it's gonna be some good energy there.
So, Turbo, you mentioned Georgia, Auburn, Ohio State, and Bama as far as taking OVs. What are you looking forward to the most about taking your official visits?
First, I want to look at a team that I'll be able to fit into the scheme. Second, I probably want to look at into like an environment that I'll be comfortable at, like outside of football. I want to be at a school where like the coaches and the relationship with the coaches and the players is a healthy relationship. And then I want to be somewhere that I'll be able to develop. So, and eventually be in the NFL.
Okay. Well, that seems like you got your like you got your notes, you're ready, you know what you're looking for. Let's talk about your game. Turbo, you're one of the smaller backs, but you run so big. Where do you get that the mentality to be able to run between the tackles the way you do and to still have the moves that you do?
Yeah, some people just got that dog in them, regardless of the size. And I definitely got that dog in me. So I mean, I may be on the smaller side, but I mean, you're not gonna see that on film. I mean, I'm gonna run the same way as a big back run, maybe even harder.
Mm-hmm. Now, I love to hear that. Now, do you play any other sports?
Uh, Not currently, but I mean, I grew up playing basketball, track, and football mainly. But I played soccer once, and I did wrestling too.
Oh, wow. Have you been able to include what you learned from any of those other sports in your game now?
Yeah, most definitely. Track definitely carried over to football. I mean, it helps out with my long speed. Mainly that. I mean, basketball most definitely because vision. That's where I get my vision from. Because basketball, you have to get past somebody with the ball and be able to put the ball in the rim or make certain passes. So it just makes football 10 times slower. And
Right.
then wrestling, I feel like that helped out with balance. I mean, I got great contact balance, so I could give some credit from that to wrestling.
I like that. You train at Madhouse, which is famous for putting out, it's like a football factory.
All right.
Talk to me about what it's been like with you training at Madhouse and how grateful you are for that staff there and what they've been able to do for you.
Yeah. First off, I want to say all the best athletes in my city they go through Madhouse. I mean, it's not one you can name. If you're a good athlete in my city, Madhouse is the place for you. So yeah, I mean, what they took me in the 8th grade, just showed me through the recruitment process and helped me get recruited. I mean, and I train with them, I lift weights with them, I get stronger, faster, and all that good stuff. So yeah.
All right, Turbo, before we get out of here, tell everybody something that you want them to know about the decision that you're about to make for the rest of for the next 3 to 4 years of your life.
Uh Decision I make for the rest of the 3, 4 years of my life. I mean, I know it's gonna go well because I'm just trusting in God and I'm pretty sure He's gonna lead me the right way.
Man, I love that. Where can everybody find you on social media?
Uh on Instagram you can find me at turbo.ant underscore and Twitter Anthony Rogers.
For sure. Turbo, man, thanks a lot. And see you soon. Hey, so after the OVs, you got to come back. We can talk about it again.
All right, thank you.